Well, hello. Leavers and believers and anybody out there with a passing interest in anything that's cool. Welcome to Leaving Hillsong. My name's Tanya and I'm super thrilled you're here. Today is an extra special event, aren't they all? This week I was fortunate enough to find time in Janice Lagata's schedule, and we sat down initially to talk about the report that Hillsong commissioned into its own East Coast campus in New York after the fallout from the Carl Lentz drama. And that report had been very difficult to come by, and I had asked Janice to chat about it with me. Janice has long been a podcaster, a writer, a musician. Her podcast, God Has Not Given, started just a month before that fallout began. And I remember knowing of her then and not knowing how we could ever kind of connect. And it's taken a little while, but we have. And then when it came to reading this report, and we'll post bits and pieces of it, it's just so kind of trashy. It was just a kind of a National Enquirer kind of report. And I don't know, 2 years ago, Janice was a New York correspondent, but she has added so much more to this conversation, and she blows me away every time she does an interview with her wisdoms and just her calm and rational approach to everything. And I just couldn't do the National Enquirer thing, so we jumped around all over the place. We talk about Vanity Fair, and we talk about people's responsibility in the system, and we talk about so much more, as well as this report and some of the people in it. So really, we just talked about all things on the Grifter Highway. So kick back and enjoy part 1 with Janice Lagata. Janice?
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome to Leaving Hillsong. I'm so excited that you're here.
So excited to be here. We knew it was going to happen eventually. It had to.
Sooner or later. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time, and trying to hook up times and outside of, major catastrophes and stuff has been really interesting. Yeah. So can I start you with our basic our first question that the first Leaving Hillsong question, which is how did you find yourself at Hillsong?
Ooh, I found myself at Hillsong proper in May of 2005 when I left my home in California and became a student of Hillsong International Leadership College. So that's how I ended up in Hillsong. And that was from growing up in church, being a creative type, being a musician, and wrestling with the pressure that maybe it still is. I don't know what's happening in evangelical culture, but it was a big push towards, for creative people using your gifts for the Lord. A lot of worry about creative kids becoming worldly, being taken in by the secular world, selling their souls. So just a lot of pressure being put on. No, you have to use this gift for the Lord and, find a way to remain holy. And so that was when, Hillsong was starting to take over the world stage. So their praise and worship music was being used and, churches all over the place. So that was how I first knew of Hillsong. They were, that poppy, modern wave of worship music. So that was,
Where was that college located?
Sydney. And I went to the Hills campus.
You stay in Sydney for how long?
I originally came and the plan was just to be here for a year, do the 1 year of college. And I ended up staying almost 4.5 years. Didn't move back to the States until 2009. I moved to the East Coast. I didn't know,
sorry, you're
not for Hillsong. Like I just needed just to be somewhere different. And I had visited a friend that I met at Hillsong College, had visited her in New York, and I was like, oh, I like it. So that's where I'll go when I go back. So I beat Hillsong New York by a couple of months, but I didn't know it was coming.
Okay. And then it opens, I mean, this is such an interesting perspective that you bring, because you saw, like, from the original birthings of the place, and there's those promo videos, where there's just a couple of guys that just have a couple of dreams and want to take it to, show the world God and stuff. And then, what we end up with. So, starting days are just a couple of guys in a band. I mean,
I guess from the outside, those couple of guys didn't even show up at first, right? Like we were having to connect groups and laying the groundwork, and it was just a team of faithful volunteers. So Carl and Laura, boom boom to this audience.
wow.
They were announced pretty early on as like members of the team, but they weren't going to be the lead pastors. They were just going to be part of the team. And then eventually it switched to no, they're going to be leading it.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And then but it was still a few months before they were actually on the ground in New York. And then Joel was after that. So it was in the early days, it was, Reed and Jess Bogard laying most of the groundwork and being the initial villains. So
I mean, even that's interesting. There was apparently the story goes that the third child of Brian and Bobby, Laura, had this week-long wedding in Fiji, and that's where the decision was made to send Carl or something. And you can just kind of see, over a week, everyone's kicking back. It was, a high-class resort for a week. The whole family's there, and it's And then, I mean, you and I got talking, not to jump to any spoilers that have already been out, but got to talking about this report that, even according to the authors, the lawyers of that report, that investigation, this thing within 10 years turns into just chaos, just unregulated chaos, right? It just appears like, even from the brief perspective of those investigators, who I was trying to look for kind of if they had any bias or, but they weren't exactly flattering and stuff to it. They didn't, seem like they were getting paid to write in a particular way, or there was some bias or something behind the scenes. It didn't have a spell check on it. Like, there's so many, it's weird. Like, for a legal document, it was so strangely structured. But as an outsider, I said to you just before, as an outsider, it's ugly. And you have to think, if these are the ones that are coming forward, like how many other kind of episodes were going on. To an insider, it just must be.
Well, when I first read it, there was nothing in it that was like, oh, I've never heard of that before. I would have never, like, it was just confirmation. Like, this was the culture, and this was the things that was happening. I think what surprised me was they didn't. So this, churches and internal investigations are always a little sus. This was done by a third party, but also, like, when they were collecting stories and testimonies and confessions for this report, you didn't email who's this, Gore and Brandeis and whatever. Like, it wasn't like you were sending an email to them. You were sending an email to Darren Kiddo. Like, so it's not like,
wow.
You know, so it's going through the Hillsong filter before they're giving,
Right.
you know, the contact information over to these people. And even like, you know, I'm in this report. No one talked to me. I didn't participate in this. So, you know, they're pulling things from other places too. And then even with all of that said, they, you know, talk to or reference something like 35, 36 people, which is not even 1% of, you know, Hillsong New York's congregation or population or people who are coming through. And it's not even 1%. And these are awful stories. These are the hand selected 1% that got through, and it's still a shit show. Like, this was the best of the worst for them, and it's awful.
I mean, in light of all the documentaries and the publicities, that is so scandalous and sensationalized and stuff. And I mean, behind this is some very, you know, real people and a culture that's been left behind. Wonder what happened on day 4 or 5 in the conversation in Fiji. You know what I mean? Just go do what you like. I mean, because we learn, you know, later on that extravagance and lack of the word no is the culture at head office back in Australia. So, I mean, how do you want to look at it? It's 49 pages. When the lawyers say that, you know, the structure was undesirable, immoral, or potentially illegal, you got to know it's saying something. Having just seen that Vanity Fair thing, you and I were both in a document. Think of it as a work of fiction. Well, it was like
it was a docudrama. That's
it was
the
a
new
docudrama.
Yeah,
like,
that's the new that's the genre where you take real things and you make a fictional version of it.
A little bit of this. I hope they get, like, you know, their leading role is played by a guy called Carl Lentz, who's in this report. And, you know, it's fascinating in terms of his ability to control, manipulate, deceive, and for his own outcome. And the report details that behavior in running the church as well as in responding to the report. There's so many times when the lawyers say that he's not believable, all those kind of things, which just, you know, which sets that culture, sets that dynamic. I'm surprised anybody wrote in at all if they had to send it via Darren Kiddo.
Yeah, but I mean, but also we know that name. We know who that is, and we forget a lot of the people on the ground don't. Like Hillsong is its own solar system, and, you know, if you're a hot shot in your campus, then you're a hot shot in your campus, but that doesn't necessarily mean anybody else knows the names or knows who's who. So I think just most lower level people, like, especially at that point, would have no idea who Darren Kiddo is.
He was a board member, and what was his responsibility there? Just,
if you don't know, I don't know.
Well, it's you know, it's often that first step where complainants, people who, you know, feel there's something wrong, want to go to an organization, or when things go really bad on a big level, and the first thing they do is invite people to come and tell them what happened. And, you know, people initially really welcome this as like, look, we're going to get some kind of reconciliation here. It's going to be great. We'll have communication. And it's like, did you see it again and again? The churches do it. And it's their best way to gather that raw information. It's like just that next level of gaslight, really. Hey. I don't know how to do this without, like, being trashy or something. Like, do you know what I mean? Going through, like, who's the bad guy in all these scenarios, and, you know, But it is such an interesting analysis of power, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
And even in the report, it was kind of disappointing on Reid this time round to say again that the focus was again pretty much on a few top ranking people, and that the scores and scores of other attendees or whatever were just not part of the report, really.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, part of it is, again, their little culling and hand selection process. But also, we're dealing with a traumatized population of people, and people who, if you're still in Hillsong, you've seen problems, you've seen issues, or you're in Hillsong and you're, casual enough where you don't see how the sausage is made, and you're just, enjoying whatever. But the hierarchies and the power play, like, it's all at play all the time. And most people, if you're still in Hillsong, you still believe in it. You still think it can be fixed, or you think it's fine, and there are just a few little things, whatever. So there's not a glut of people who are still in Hillsong and who have like a proper view of it, who are going to share their stories. Like, they're only going to speak if they feel enough freedom to, if they even feel like their story matters, and if they feel like they are still being respectful and honorable. Like, the honor culture is a big deal. So I don't even know how you could get proper report about Hillsong from
Right.
Hillsong people. Like, yeah, do I think this firm was hired by Hillsong? Yeah, obviously. And, as bad as the report is, do I think they still cleaned up a lot and left out a lot? And yeah, obviously. Especially at this point, there's no way to tell a properly focused Hillsong story from the outside. Like, it's just, I don't think it can, because if you're coming into it, why are you coming into it? Why did it get your attention? Why are you interested in this now? And if you're coming at it from this scandal perspective, like, oh, well, I heard Hillsong self-destructed and I want to see what that's about. Like, it's, voyeur culture, and it's a scandal, and it's capitalism. Like, you're here and you're trying to tell this story because it's going to garner you attention or make you money. And that's your guiding light that's bringing you into it, and that's going to be your guiding light going through it. So, with Vanity Fair, it's disappointing, but it's also not that surprising. Like, we trusted these people because we had to, or we thought we had to, right? Like, we've been ringing this bell for so long and trying to get people to look and to listen. And so here's somebody saying, oh no, I get it. I want to tell your story and I want to bring it to this audience. And we don't have that audience. Or we didn't think we did. And so we say, okay, I'll let you do the legwork, and I'll let you, put the work in, put the money behind it. And I'm going to trust that you're a sensible person and you can see, what's what.
It's Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair would never do something like, they're huge. They would never not do what they said, or bait and switch. And
yeah, that's what you would think. And for me, it wasn't even so much like Vanity Fair, because like what even is that? I can't tell you like who runs Vanity Fair. I don't know. But like, yeah, it's just banking on the name and this kind of journalistic integrity. And I'm feeling defensive and kind of protective of those of us who participated, because I hate us feeling like we got duped again and questioning ourselves, because all the signs were right and they were good, right? And we're talking to Alex French and Dan Adler, and who did great jobs before. And so why would we think they wouldn't? Like, all of this happened coming up on 3 years ago, and a lot of us have been in communication with some of these people from then. So it isn't like, they just sprung up one day and like, hey, you guys want to be in our documentary? And we're like, we've never seen or heard from any of you. It's like, no, these are people who got in at the beginning of the story and kind of established themselves as people to be trusted. So yeah, we had no reason not to. And at some point, right, if you want to get the story out there, if you want to warn other people, you're going to have to trust other people. So that's what we were presented with. And, I don't know. I don't know where it went off the rails or who, who was the one to buy into the allure. And I don't even think they bought into the allure. I think they played themselves. I think they got too eager to hook this big fish and didn't pay attention to the contracts, just gave up too much, expecting Carl to give more than he did. And yeah, I think they got played.
And that was a saving one for me when you wrote your open letter and you said, imagine getting got in 2023. We all got in 2010. And a psychologist friend of mine has said to me, like, this is just proof that people like Carl can twist anyone. They can manipulate anyone. So that's kind of seen me through, because I mean, I had no idea that he was going to be in the production until the trailer dropped. Had you been told?
No, absolutely not.
And then, like, for me, I sort of just held on good faith, even so. And then something happened.
Yeah. And I spent a lot of time before the documentary release in that space between, when the press release came out and then before the documentary dropped, just talking people down and be like, no, I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be okay. I was banking a lot on documentaries that have been done well. Like, I was thinking especially about like LuLaRich, and those are the people who have now done Shiny Happy People. But like LuLaRich had the owners of LuLaRoe in the documentary as well. But they were handled in such a way, and not even handled, like they were just allowed to tell their story, but also, push back on, ask questions, and just allowed to be there and be themselves and, let the audience see, oh, yeah, okay, they're here and their perspective is what it is and it's valid to them, but they're still not great people. And we're not coddling them or trying to make them, look better than they were. So like, it can be done. And that's what I hoped would happen. And it just wasn't.
It's plenty of times you can do it. Bad Vegan, I think that was kind of, she kind of showed herself, and that's what I assumed was going to happen. That just, you show a Carl Lentz on camera and you see what it is. But then they framed this thing. One of the sharpest points that I couldn't believe that they left in there was the relationship between him, who was the like number one guy there, and his nanny, a woman called Leona, who was also like a friend of his wife's. And in this documentary, he's given the final word on, or the only word really, on, whether that was an abusive relationship or not. And I found that quite, staggering as well. It's a messy situation. It's a chunk of this report as well. Like, I don't know what, and there's the pay rates and stuff in there as well. It's just exploitation all over the place.
Yeah. And that's why, like, I struggle to refer to this documentary as like journalism, because it's not even that. Again, have Carl and Lentz, have Carl and Laura on. Who cares? Talk to them. But I don't know. It's like, did you and all of Vanity Fair, did none of you see this report? So are you not?
They didn't.
So if you didn't see this report, how did you not see this report? Like, it's been out for 2 years. This is your job. How did you not get a hold of this? And what
they
does
told
that
me afterwards? Yeah, they didn't. So I don't know, but
And it's like, you didn't know it existed. You know it existed. You didn't try. You didn't. So you guys don't have that much pull. Like, it's, so that's just strange. Like, this is like low hanging fruit. And not that it's easy to get, but it's not impossible. And so the fact that you don't have like the bare basics, yeah, that just doesn't speak well of you or this endeavor. But yeah, even barring that, like, you just, how do you have Carl Lentz there and you're going to talk about this affair, which I guess you only know about because it was in the media. You guys did no digging, because if you had seen this report or talked to anyone else, you would know that the stories and the timelines aren't matching up. This wasn't Carl's only affair. So to let Laura sit there and play this role and pretend like, oh, this affair came out and, I found out on this day, and for a long time, not this particular affair, but like you've known what the score is. And so for nobody to ask you any follow-up questions about that, if we're going to talk specifically about Carl and Leona, and again, like you said, he kind of got to have the last word and declare, oh, it was not abuse. This was just an affair. If he's going to say that, fine. And if you're not going to push back on him, fine. But you also have therapists. You have trained therapists that you commissioned who were part of this thing. Let them speak to it. Let somebody else talk about spiritual abuse. Let somebody else talk about power dynamics. And again, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to get Carl Lentz to say anything. But the information is here. Just put it out there. So it's just a real dereliction of duty.
That's basic Me Too kind of protocol. That's the kind of stuff where I'm going, do you know what I mean? Like, do they really? Like, that's why I was like, I said to them, like, how much did he pay you to do this? But it's just, these real basics of, even if you're pretending that you did due diligence, you would have had somebody come in and say, well, I don't know. She wasn't even that old in the beginning. Like, he was a few years older than her. She's in her early 20s, the nanny Leona, right?
I don't even know.
I don't know.
She's a grown woman.
Right, yes.
And also, Leona Kimes was absolutely abused by Carl Lentz. And Leona Kimes has absolutely profited and benefited from that system and is herself a villain in that system. But yeah, it is abuse. And the fact that they couldn't just get someone to say that, shocking.
Yeah. Or even suggest it at all, something. It was, anyway, you touch on something that to me is one of the most common and the most difficult areas that I come across, that I know a lot of people struggle with, is that whole, what do you do with somebody who's, for every wonderful story someone will tell you about someone else will come along and tell you that they got screamed at by that same person. So, like, what do you do with this person was a victim, but they were also an abuser, like, straight out? How do you kind of reconcile that stuff on there? Just, I don't know. I mean, again, a huge question, but
how do I address it? So I was in that system, and I thought of myself as a villain way before I thought of myself as a victim. It feels weird to kind of know how to think about these people now, because on one hand, they're terrible people. They're awful. They're bad. They're bad people. Not because of, human depravity and, what evangelicalism will say, which we're all depraved and we're all awful people. Yeah. No, we're not. We're not. So these people are bad because they have consistently made bad choices. They come into a room, they come into a situation, and for whatever reason, whatever childhood wounds, whatever, we all have all of our reasons for being who we are and how we are. But they consistently decided to walk into rooms and be the biggest asshole, to be awful, to abuse their power, to abuse whatever they have. They're bad people. But like, when I think about myself, I'm not a better person than them, in the sense that, these are people who we're here and we're talking and we're having, lots of people are talking and lots of people have had experiences because these people are on the top of this system, the system that was telling us, no, these are the people you follow. These are the people you look to learn how to be better. And so they're there and they've been put here assumedly by God because God sees something in them or God knows something or whatever, but these are God's top picks. So then how do I have a more developed conscience than you? How do I feel worse about these things than you do? I don't think I do. Like I can't say, well, I don't think Carl Lentz has a conscience. I don't think Carl Lentz knows right from wrong. No, he does. And he chooses every day to bypass that, to purposefully subvert it when he can, right? To use what he knows people think of him, to use his power, his privilege, his position, and the honor and the respect that people have been taught to give for that. And he uses all of that. He knows that's all there and he uses it to his advantage to do the wrong thing. Like it's not even about like have power, have position, have money. Those aren't the issues. Like what are you doing with them? And they keep choosing to do the wrong thing. And they know they're doing the wrong thing. So for me, if you were part of the system and you were abusive, you were a villain, if you had any amount of power, you probably were. Not because you're a bad person, but you were brought up, you were taught, you know, some things can't be taught, they have to be caught. Well, you caught on to how to be an awful person, how to survive in this system. There's nothing we can do about what has happened and who we were then. But if today, at your big age, whatever it is, in 2023, you still can't cop to what you were a part of, you still can't admit that there are issues here and that you were complicit, that you had a part in it, well, there's nothing to say to you because for what? You're not a good person and you know that. If I know it, you know it. And so I don't know, there's just a lot of arguments I just don't have anymore because what are we going around for? This is a bad system. This is a bad system that has hurt a lot of people. And you are like, there's a level of like selfishness and arrogance. Like if you're fine with that, if you're saying, well, okay, yeah, I know that Carl Lentz abused a lot of people. I know that Carl Lentz, abused his power and treated this woman in a way that she should not have been treated, regardless of what I think of her or how I feel about her. Like this should not have happened, but it was fine for me. I had a good experience. So you're okay with like it's worth it to you. Somebody else's physical, emotional, sexual abuse is worth it for you. Like you're fine that that's the price tag that came for your good experience. Not a great experience, probably, but just a fine experience. Oh, I didn't get yelled at by Carl Lentz today. And that is worth, that's worth Leona Kimes, going through whatever emotional trauma. And it's just a dark view of your good God. Like your good God needs all these awful things to happen to get a song about him out, to
I wonder how often you hear people say, because I hear it quite a bit, well, the one good person at Hillsong was though, or but really you've got to say that, so and so was he was the real deal. I mean, the rest of the place was terrible, but he was the real deal. And it's like if people can have that one person, then maybe the whole thing's not rotten or something. But it comes up time and time again. And as for people's own personal responsibility, there are some people who are very, very tied to the idea of being a victim, like 100%. And it's almost like if they're not that, then maybe they got scammed. And that is much more difficult pill to swallow. I don't know.
It's brutal to give so much of yourself to something and then have to realize, oh, this was not the best thing. Yeah, I think a lot of people just get caught up in, the sunk cost fallacy. Well, I put so much time and energy and money and myself and my ego, and I've, told so many people that they're wrong. I can't turn back now. I gotta fix it. I gotta make it work.
Which sounds again like Laura Lentz. I wanted to ask you about Laura because she's kind of done the same thing with her own marriage and stuff. Or has she, or what was that? Because that was not the most outstanding role model for women. A lot, that she's turned up on this Vanity Fair interview and she's like, I mean, that's a genuine pain on her face. I'm sure it is. She was humiliated and she lost a lot of status, a lot of everything. But she's also demonstrating as whatever women's leader she was, that you just, you do your best to make things work. She's a pastor's kid as well. So, I mean, it's a mitigating kind of thing. They grow up in this tiny little world. I get that. I mean, she's also very well grown up. What of the misogyny could you feel and did you experience over the time? Like, it's so insidious in a lot of ways, or overt. I mean, you tell me what it was like there. It's so alpha male-y from the sounds of all accounts.
Yeah. I mean, Hillsong.
Hillsong. This is a much longer conversation, and part 2 will be out tomorrow. I hope you've all enjoyed this part of the Grifter Highway with Janice Lagata from New York. God Has Not Given is her podcast. And she's recently put out a book called Gift of God. Check it out. Thanks for all your support, messages, comments, stories. We'll be back tomorrow. So be kind to the people around you and don't forget yourself in that. Be good to you. And keep living Hillsong. And we'll talk soon. Bye.